think easily my biggest beef with conservatism in the United States, especially in Washington, D.C., is really an inability to recognize that there is a battle for free enterprise that's being fought on two different fronts. There is the battle of socialism that conservatives, I think, have been diligent about fighting. It's easy to recognize they have, proposed all sorts of legislation, whatever the case may be, in order to deal with this problem. But there is a second front that I think conservatives, especially conservative lawmakers, have really fallen into the trap of, and that is the problem of corporatism. Corporatism, I think, is a bigger threat today in the United States than socialism was in the 1970s and 1980s, whenever Reagan was leading a crusade to end socialism and end communism overseas. And today, that battle is a battle that's being fought right here in the United States, and that is a battle between corporate influence in Washington, D.C. and everyday people. Some conservatives would call this class warfare, but that's not really what I mean. I don't mean that making money is bad or that profit motives are bad. What I mean is that giving influence in government based on how much money you have or how big your business is bad for representative democracy, and it is not conservatism. Part of the problem, the real part of the problem for me, is that the liberals have been great at saying that they have a solution for the problem of corporatism and corporate influence in the United States, which is just utter lunacy as far as I'm concerned, because big government, in my thinking, is big business. I think Obamacare is a great example of this. First, it passes a piece of legislation that puts in place minimum loss ratio requirements that make it nearly impossible for new insurance companies to compete with the existing companies that pushed for the bill. So it basically turns those into monopolies. And then it goes and it gives exemptions to 1,200 different companies that are friends of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, not based on any specific need, but just based on the amount of influence that they have in Washington, D.C. So the employees of those companies are still on the hook. They still have to spend their own money to buy health insurance, but because their employers have good friends in Washington, D.C., it's not their responsibility anymore. I think that is the perfect example of what liberalism does under the auspices of saying we're going to deal with the problem of corporatism, that it costs way too much money to get health care, and they blame that on big business, but then they are turning around and giving those same big businesses billions and billions of dollars in profits and in subsidies through this one bill. So what is the answer then? And I think that, obviously I've said already, the answer is conservatism. It's a true form of conservatism that battles against corporatism. If you look up a basic textbook definition of what it means to be a conservative, you're going to find that it will usually say something like respect for free markets, respect for the rule of law, and for representative democracy. Those are three characteristics that I think just about everybody agrees on as conservative principles. Let's look at how big government and big business work together to undermine all of these principles. Obviously, when we are giving out special interests and subsidies to different organizations, it's undermining free enterprise in the sense that it's not giving you money based on how competitive your business is, how good your business model is. It's giving you money based just on how many friends you have in Washington, how good your K Street lobbyist is in pursuing the interests of your country. That's not free enterprise. That is using the government to your own purposes. Secondly, it undermines the rule of law because it allows us, basically, like with the Obamacare example, to carve out special exemptions for key companies, again, based on the influence that they have. And then finally, it undermines representative democracy by taking the power out of the hands of the people that politicians, specifically conservative politicians, were sent there to represent, and then saying, never mind, let's give all of that influence to corporations that might not even exist in the district that a given individual is representing. So what is the Republican Party's solution to this problem? The easy answer is that they absolutely do not have one. There's not one. I think that the solution can't be a Republican solution. It has to be a true conservative solution to that problem. And what I mean by that is that it starts with us. It starts with normal, everyday consumers, because we have to start spending our money in places that are not getting special special handouts from the federal government. We have to start spending our money in ways that reflect our own interests. If we're opposed to sweatshops overseas and think it's deplorable, then why are we still shopping at companies that give those handouts? We have to start voting with our pocketbooks, and then we have to start voting out the politicians that are taking our hard-earned tax dollars and giving that to large corporations. It's so curious that conservatives are working diligently to fight against social welfare programs and spending that I agree in many instances are wasteful and bad and could be reformed. But then for the biggest chunk of this spending that's going out to major corporations, $100 billion last year, that conservatives are basically silent because they are among the people that are getting the kickbacks from these big businesses. And it's just not right. We, as individuals, have to stand up and say, look, this isn't conservative. It's not right. If you are not going to agree to change your ways, get back in line with the conservative movement, then you've got to go.